the Critical Minerals Act, if you look at it as a piece of mineral governance regulation, is not that impressive. Again, because it is skirting the line with mandate, no mandate. So it is a regulation, so there are elements of it which are binding for the member states. But the reality is it sets a direction. It sets a series of targets, which are not binding, but are really going to drive a lot of the decision making. So I think three things to remember about the CRM Act. The first is that it tries to constitute a unified theory of CRM. The EU tried to set out in the CRM Act, but also in the communication that accompanied it when it was first presented in March 2023, a holistic approach of CRM in the internal market and CRM as an element of foreign policy. So whilst we've been adopting the CRM Act, the EU has also been pursuing a new raw materials diplomacy with strategic partnerships. All of those principles are under the same sort of umbrella, the same approach. And of course, it's an integrated theory because it tries to cover extraction, processing, recycling, diversification from partners, diversification of supply. So it tries to cover very widely. I think the second aspect that's important is that it's very much based on a Team Europe approach. And if you look at it, fundamentally, the EU there is recycling approaches which worked on other things. Setting targets is exactly how the EU sort of defined a leadership position on climate goals. Having a very Team Europe approach, having a view on a governance board where, you know, member states are supposed to come together and advise the Commission and fundamentally define their shared priorities. Having a view of private sector, you know, following this direction set by the policy shapers. This is fundamentally what worked in, for example, dealing with vaccines and PPE during the COVID crisis. So I think the complexity of the CRM equation is a little bit of the hurdle here, because the Team Europe approach works if you have one clear target. We need vaccine. If you're dealing with 17 strategic raw materials, each of which can actually become hundreds of mineral products, and you're trying to define what are common needs, common priorities, and therefore common plans, there's still some work to do. So the Team Europe approach is essential, but it's very much evolving. And then the third thing that I think is important, and this sets it apart from the US approach, is very much a picking winners kind of, you know, approach from the EU, which is a bit of a paradox because the EU is not exactly the leader in mining and minerals, you know, discussions worldwide. But the EU chose not to do like a blanket approach the way the IRA fundamentally opens up a blanket of different incentives and you need to come under them. So the EU based its whole approach on identifying certain projects as being strategic projects with more help, more support, more policy backing. Strategic partnerships, redesigning foreign relations around energy and CRM with key partners. And of course, the definition of strategic raw materials, which, if you think about it, is actually a really smart way to walk away from the stringent criticality criteria. The best way to see the value in that is that the EU basically said, okay, nickel and copper technically are not critical. They fall outside the threshold of supply risk, even though they're economically very important and will continue to be so. They are strategic raw materials because they're so essential to all of the key technologies and sectors that we don't really care if they come under the threshold today. So there is a very forward-looking approach. The problem is if you're going to pick winners, you need to know why. And at the moment, we still struggle to understand the why in some of the actions. And that's where we're going to face the test of reality with the strategic projects application, which is currently ongoing and should deliver the first strategic projects by the end of the year. That should